And then doing it over a computer is like certainly like a little strange. But I think that something that's really cool about it is that like you can go off and work on some instrumental part that you want to maybe work on. I can work on something over on my end. We have each other muted. We for a second are like, go, go, go. And then it's like, okay, show me what thing you came up with here. Like, I'm like, I got something here. And I think it's like collaborative, but also there's a little bit of separation where for me, it almost allowed me to like go off. If I had a moment of inspiration, I was like, hey, I'm muting you. I'm going to run with this idea for a second. And I'd go off into my own world and then come back with it.
Hey everybody. This week on The Record Process, our guest is the wonderfully talented LA-based singer and songwriter Celeste Tauchar. We dive into the conception and production of her newest EP, In Awes of Insignificance, which she released on March 25th under the name Talker. Each song offers a beautifully unique and immersive vibe, powered by lush instrumentation and Celeste's incredibly intimate vocal performances. We discuss her process for finding inspiration and writing these songs during the pandemic, working with producer Dan Sedin at his Ojai, California studio to weave all of these sonic elements together, and how she ultimately undertook the project of creating a visual world to accompany the EP by producing a series of stunningly cinematic music videos to coincide with the release. With the current digital landscape of the music industry becoming exponentially reliant upon the power of a visually driven narrative, I think there's so much we can learn from the kind of holistic vision Celeste brought to this project. So with that, let's jump into it after this quick word about our sponsors. When the world shut down in 2020, musicians and producers everywhere were forced to re-examine and reimagine their creative process. Without the possibility of in-person studio collaboration, the future of music production was anything but certain. But as the old saying goes, where there's a will, there's a way. And for those professionals who were determined to never compromise on the quality of their audio, the world-class engineers at Audio Movers established that way. By combining the HD streaming of lossless multi-channel audio straight from your DAW with the unique ability to adjust latency and bitrate, Listen To stands as the solution to unlocking global creativity in music production. Its power has been felt on Grammy Award-winning albums and on over 85% of all modern Abbey Road studio sessions. So stop letting your physical location dictate the quality of your work and the projects within your reach. For a free trial, just follow the link in our show notes and use the code PROCESS to receive 10% off the first year of your membership. Listen, if you're an artist or musician still struggling to find a better way to distribute and promote your music, and you haven't checked out DistroKid yet, then that needs to jump straight to the top of your to-do list. We are proud to have them back with us for another season of The Record Process, primarily because they, just like us, are committed to empowering and supporting independent artists like you. DistroKid is by far the most affordable service for distributing your music to all digital streaming platforms, and it comes with a bunch of tools to help you elevate your career in a ton of crucial ways. DistroKid not only allows you to spread your music across the streaming ecosystem, regardless of what platform might be top of your focus right now, but it also helps you share your story with labels using their unique upstream tool. You can engage with your fan base using DistroKid's text messaging feature, and they'll even help you create unique lyric videos that can help you promote your music better online. As a Record Process listener, you can get 30% off of your first year's membership just by heading to the show notes and signing up using our affiliate link there. And remember, we always love hearing what you're working on and how tools like DistroKid are helping you create some incredible moments for your fan base. So please don't hesitate to share them with us. And now, here's our interview. Tauchar, welcome to The Record Process. How are you doing?
I'm good. Thank you for having me.
Our absolute pleasure. I have a feeling this is going to be quite a delight. While we're starting things off, I would love for you to go ahead and, yes, I'm going to do this because we just kind of rehearsed it before we started recording. I'd love you to talk to us about how you got that name of yours and where it comes from. Because as a man with a last name that has a tricky little E on the end of it that seems to always throw people for no good reason, I think your story is actually way better and way more fitting. And I love the name of the project in general. And it was so cool to hear that that's where it came from. So I'd love to start off by having you maybe give us some background on that.
Yeah, thank you. Well, my last name is Tauchar. And for anyone listening, if you like look up the name, it is not spelled how you would think. It's just, it looks like it's like Tauchar or something. And I've gotten like so many different iterations of it throughout my life. And like, I literally like wrote the pronunciation of it for my both high school and college graduation, and they still did it wrong. So that's been my life. And when trying to come up with a name for the project, I knew that I didn't want to have it be my first and last name, for example, because I was like, nobody's getting that. But I thought that Tauchar was like nice and concise and sounded cool, and was also just like paying homage to it, and also like one of the many different pronunciations that I've gotten for it in my lifetime.
Oh, well, that is an incredible way to start things off. Also, it's a lovely name, but yes, I think that's a very, very astute decision, honestly, to lean into that one, because both just a really cool name in general for the project, but also taking something that is decidedly authentic to you in your life and finding that that thing, and when it clicks. And we talk a lot about that on the show. So I love that you kind of covered that right off the bat with the name. So that's brilliant. Yes, Celeste, thank you for telling us about that. But the reason that we have asked you to join us here is obviously due to more than just your name. It is, in fact, due to a recent EP that you have released called Awes of Insignificance, right? There's so many places that we could start with this, but I would love to go back. Well, let's go back to before this EP a little bit, because I think that shines some light on some context, right? Let's talk to us about what happened right around the time that you released the previous EP called Wax in the beginning of 2020, because that also kind of coincided with something else. I can't quite recall, but what was that like?
Yeah, well, it's funny because I feel like so many people had this experience where I'm like, I put out a record and then I didn't get to play it live. It's like, boo-hoo. So did all of us. But yeah, I put out my EP Wax on March 6th, 2020, which thank God, because Jamie Coletta and I were talking about potentially instead doing a March 12th or whatever that time release. And if it had been like, I managed to play a release show for my EP. It was that weekend where we were like, oh, shit is kind of hitting the fan, but also like nobody knew what was going on. You thought that if you tapped elbows, you were fine. So I played a release show and everything. And I was like, no, I want to put it out this week. So like very happy that I did. But yeah, I mean, it was pretty surreal. It was kind of, it was like at the time everybody was doing the live streams and stuff, and it was still kind of like fun. We thought we'd be in pandemic for a couple months. We're like, we'll just connect on Instagram Live.
Zoom party.
So I was, I was able to like, obviously, I would have loved to be able to promote it in a traditional way, as we all would have loved to do at that time. But I did a lot of like live stream stuff and like a lot of like publications and stuff who had social pages. Like they had me come on and play on their platforms and stuff. And people were like really supportive of trying to help spread the word, which was really nice. But yeah, I mean, I played emo night the night of the release, and like nobody that I knew got COVID, but it's like it was confirmed as a super spreader event, but we didn't know what that was, right? But yeah.
I was actually in now that you say that, I think that exact week, like the week before everything kind of hit the fan, I think I was actually out that way. I think that was right as I was touring through California, because it was we were riding a wave, and like we would play a venue under a city, and like 2 days later they would like put a cap on gatherings. So that the writing was definitely on that wave as we crossed it.
I think I worked your LA show at the Regent.
Oh, well, look at that.
Yes, I did. Oh my God, I did. Because I used to do hospitality there, and Jamie was there.
Yeah.
And yeah, I was in the green room, but I didn't,
I was small world.
I was just like mousing around and putting things on the table, and everybody was really nice, but then I would leave, and yeah. That was like March, whatever, like 10th, 11th, around that time. Right. Yeah.
Well, I'm glad we were on our best behavior.
Yeah. All good things.
Because otherwise this would have never happened. Yeah. Oh man. Yeah. Look at that. So we were all in it. We, all kind of lived through that same weird transitional, like almost like just couple of days in a way, where seeing it kind of so come. Fast. Yeah. And then it really was just right here. It took away the opportunity to tour or play more shows in that immediate future. So some people kind of just balled up under the blanket and said, I can't do anything, and understandably so. What in this case did you do? Because I think you kind of turned the other way and said, okay, next.
Yeah. I mean, I think that like sometimes to my own detriment, I have like such a productivity, like forward mindset that I've tried to kind of curb in a way, actually. But I just was writing. I think it timed out well where, despite the fact that like it was absolute chaos and it was unprecedented, to use that word, and all of that, I because I wanted to be writing new music and I was kind of going through a time in my life where, it was just a fruitful time for like writing and creating. And so I just kind of turned to that. And so it worked out well in terms of like, I had a lot of time to write, it wasn't like I had other stuff going on. And I don't know, I think, this is obviously like getting into like the whole thing behind the record that we'll get into, but I feel very lucky that I was living in LA at the time and not somewhere like New York where like people were literally like stuck in their apartments. I think I definitely had a relatively easy pandemic experience. I live in a house in LA. It was like, it's beautiful all the time and you could like drive to the beach and like that was a thing that you could do because you weren't around people. And so I started like hiking and camping a lot and just trying to like, I don't know, like I found myself being really inspired, which was like a weird dichotomy as I also was finding this like pit of despair about the state of the world. But like for me personally, it was like a really creative time.
Oh, wow. Yeah. I mean, and sometimes it does take that circumstance to be the catalyst for a new wave of productivity and inspiration. I love that. I mean, so let's get into talking writing, and that's because obviously, you could go find outdoor isolation and open spaces. But when it comes to, collaborating and or, getting into it, what did that look like? Did you open up your notebook? Did you just sit down with a guitar and just, carve out time every day to do it? And or did you lean into our new friend Zoom? and how did you utilize that, right?
Yeah, you know what? I leaned into Zoom. I really did. I mean, I definitely did find myself having moments where I would kind of like return to that, like, writing in your room by yourself the way you did as a teenager. And like there was a beauty in that where I feel like, in the just rat race that is like what we do, sometimes that gets lost. So that was definitely cool. And like I did that, but I really leaned into Zoom, and I'm lucky to have like some collaborators that I work with consistently who I really love working with. And it didn't feel weird because we're already so close. And, I have a little recording set up here. So we would write together and then I would like record the vocals and send it over or whatever, record my guitars and send it. So it was like, I hilariously like, even though there's never going to be anything better than being in the room with someone and having that real back and forth. Sometimes like on Zoom, you knock a song out in 4 hours and then you turn it off and you don't have to drive home in traffic. You're home. Like there's an element to it that I do really like in ways. It's not my preferred type of writing, but I leaned into it. And it's cool too. Like I was able to collaborate with people in New York where like I otherwise wouldn't have done sessions with them.
Yeah. Who were some of your collaborators then? Both virtual and or in person. Obviously we'll get to that part of the process, but
yeah, my main friend who I executive produced the record with is this guy, Dan Sadin, who's an He's like an incredible guitarist and producer, and he's like my brother. We used to play together touring in this band Friendship, which is how we met, and then he has since moved on to work with me. So we did a lot, but I worked with this guy Nico, who he does live in LA, but I had never met him before. So we did a Zoom session for my song For the Sake of It. I have started working recently with this guy in New York. His name is Alex. He actually plays guitar for that band Bare Hands, if you're familiar with them. They're pretty cool, but he has a project called Dee Dee Walker, and we're playing a show together in New York in July, and we met because we got put into a virtual session. He's in New York, I'm in LA, and we would have never met if we didn't have like a Zoom session put together.
That's awesome. Can you walk us, let's say, like through that Zoom session? I don't know, when I was doing some like Zoom sessions myself, like it was all over the place because like you're not in a new space, you're in the comfort of your home. And so like it's such a unique aspect that like is another vulnerability. You're already so vulnerable while songwriting. So could you walk us through like one of those sessions, I guess?
Yeah. I mean, like in working with somebody new, for example, like this bi-coastal new person that I'm like in a session with, I think that, I don't know, I think that I am somebody who like very quickly, as you will both see over the next hour, I like very quickly, I'm like, hey, this is my life story. Here is everything that I have ever thought. So I think that it was helpful to lean into that with Zoom because I think it made people more comfortable quickly. But, you know, there is this thing where you're like, there's already that awkwardness when you're in the room, like you're saying, where you're like, so tell me what's like on your mind. And then doing it over a computer is like certainly like a little strange. But I think that something that's really cool about it is that like you can go off and work on some instrumental part that you want to maybe work on. I can work on something over on my end. We have each other muted. We for a second are like, go. And then it's like, okay, show me what thing you came up with here. I'm like, I got something here. And I think it's like collaborative, but also there's a little bit of separation where for me, it almost allowed me to like go off. If I had a moment of inspiration, I was like, hey, I'm muting you. I'm going to run with this idea for a second. And I'd go off into my own world and then come back with it. And I think sometimes when you're in the room with people, you feel like you always need to be kind of like catering to each other and like checking in like, oh, here's an idea, but it's, I don't know, it doesn't have to be the idea we use, but like, here it is. Whereas I was like, hey, I have an idea. I'm muting myself and I'm going to play this out for a second and then I'll come back to you.
I'm going to close the blinds. I'm going to hit the stop video link and then we're going to take 5 and then I don't have to be in the same room with you concerned with what you're thinking and or should I be interacting with you. That's a really great point and almost fits as a strength to virtual songwriting in that regard, because you can dip in and out and have those little bursts of creativity where you like kind of throw something like on the other side of the net and be like, all right, cool, I'm gonna go over here real quick. You juggle that for a second. And that's really interesting. I found a lot of the same stuff, interestingly, with some of like I'll work with some artists from like a coaching standpoint and or talk through some creative like ideas and starting to flesh out that stuff. And it's like you'll have those moments where you can't necessarily synthesize like a whole idea and come up with like, hey, let's make a list of like the 5 like parts that really feel weakest in this section or this song right now. And, you need some time to go do that work. And sometimes I'll even, like just put a timer on and just like go do a free write, right? Do some writing exercises like that. That's exactly what you're talking about there. I think that's such a great idea that you knew that about yourself. And you're like, hey, I'm going to just step aside. Yeah. And that they were like, totally, I get it. And I think that's a really great point. I'm so glad you mentioned that. Yeah. Yeah.
Out of this process, Case, I really like.
Yeah. Honestly, I wish there was an animation.
I'm gonna roll.
Well.
Yeah. Just so. Was there any moment on the EP that was just like, oh yeah, this moment would have never happened if these blinds were always open?
You know, a couple. And I don't know if it would have never happened, but there were definitely things that were just very aided by that. I mean, I guess the answer is yes now that I'm thinking about it. But like, for example, in My Meds, the closing track, that song, and I guess this isn't necessarily from a writing perspective, but just from like a remote working perspective, that song took a really long time to figure out the production because I knew that it needed to be different from the other songs, but we just couldn't nail it. We even that was with a friend of mine who is LA based, and we even, during one of the times where the pandemic felt less crazy, we got together in the studio and tried to just track the vocals. It didn't feel right. We were in a session working it out, and I said to him, I was like, you know what, I need to re-record these vocals, and I kind of want to send them to you right now. I'm gonna go away for a second. And I recorded those final vocals lying on my floor in my bedroom, and it took 10 minets once I just went off and did it, and then I sent it to him, and he dropped them in, and we were like, yeah, that's the one, all of the time that we got together in the studio, it failed and was not right. So that was cool. And the song IRL, that was a virtual session. I worked with Danny Murcia of the band Ex Mañana, which is amazing LA-based Spanglish shoegaze band. Highly recommend checking them out.
What a sentence. We love that.
Yeah. That was an entirely remote collaboration. And we did a session together over Zoom, and then they ran with the production. I ran with some lyric stuff. But that really, again, it was just, I don't know if it was some striking moment, but it was another example of me being hey, I have this thing. I need to kind of close the blinds and run with this idea. Yeah. And that was kind of how that song came together.
That's awesome. I mean, so when you're working in a remote collaborative sense like that, talk us through a little bit of how the productions start to take shape. You mentioned, flying, a vocal over to them, sending, maybe sending some multi-tracks that you've cut in your bedroom. Mm-hmm. Is that just for the demoing standpoint, or are you cutting these things that live on the record in real time there during these sessions? And then where do you take the direction? Because again, even just listening to some of the stripped down versions, either with the AV Club session you did with, the last EP and things like that, it sounds great. And the songs have such a great charm to them. But then you listen to, this EP and it feels like, some of those songs start in that way. They start with that kind of very small, intimate character and have this intriguing energy to them. But the places that they go and anybody that might not be familiar, once you listen to the EP, you will know exactly what I'm talking about when I say that, because these things just open up into an amazingly cinematic instrumentation and landscape and are just so immersive. So do you do talking back and forth about the sonic vision of those things? Are you sending some of those elements? Where does that all come from after you have the basis of a song structure together?
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's not really a singular clear answer, I think, but because it was this long process. But so for some of the songs, most of them, like I said, were written over Zoom, and there was an initial demo phase. So I think for all of those songs that are on the record, there was at least at some point a demo version with vocals that I cut in my room. So I went up to my friend Dan Saden's studio in Ojai. He moved there during the pandemic and set up a garage studio. And once we had the songs together for the EP, we were cool, we're gonna get COVID tests, and I'm just gonna come up and stay with you for a month, and we'll just knock this out, because he executive produced the record with me. But what that meant was there were a handful of songs where he was the producer with me on them. And then for a few of the other ones, being IRL, Little Bird, and My Meds, those 3 songs were songs that I was writing and working on with these other producer friends of mine. So for those, I did record the final vocal here on this microphone, in literally right here in my room, and some of the guitars and stuff as well. And then they would take that stem, produce it out, and then at the end, Dan and I would like really go in with our mix engineer, make sure it all sounded cohesive, kind of bring it together so that those felt in a similar space with the ones that he and I had worked on together. But as far as like the overall production and getting it to that cinematic level, it was like definitely a long process. And I think that like being able to like run away to a studio in a beautiful place and like have like a month of only focusing on that was the answer for that. You know, you just dive in so much into that world, into that space. And I think that, I don't know if it's like specific to LA, but I think it is a very LA thing, you know, the sessions world and everything else I've ever released, and like Wax, the EP before this one and all of that. It was like a session day here, a recording day here, a recording day here in the midst of my busy life schedule in LA. And I think the fact that we had the pandemic stopping me from having anything else and also being physically just there working on it, I don't know, it was so much more immersive for me too, creating it.
Yeah. I mean, it's an extended flow state where normally you have to kind of like switch it on and then switch it back off. Taking a minute here to shout out our good friends at Sheet Happens Publishing, back with us again for season 3. They are a company that works directly with artists to create accurate and immersive tab books, vinyl, and other merch that allows fans to get one step closer to perfecting the soundtrack of their lives. As many of you may know, I had the pleasure of working side by side with them to put together a book for my band, The Wonder Years, and believe me, they are incredibly thorough and always dedicated to artist-approved accuracy in every one of their books. Every tab book comes with the accompanying guitar profiles, which allow you to jump right into playing along with all of your favorite tracks. So all you need to do is head over to sheethappenspublishing.com to check out everything they have to offer, and be sure to enter the code TRP15 at checkout for 15% off your first purchase. Or you can find the link in our show notes, and again, that's promo code TRP15. Talk to us about the instrumentation then too, and then the choices. So you have the time, you have the space to stay in it. Were there things that that you knew you wanted to try and experiment with? Are those things you mentioned, the executive production title, in terms of Dan as a collaborator there? Talk to us about what those roles are like, and if it's like, hey, I have this, pedal, let's take it off the shelf, or because I think there's always a cool back and forth. And sometimes, I mean, hell, some of the best times they're spawned out of just like jokes like, hey, wouldn't it be awesome if we, put a vibra-slap through this, chamber reverb at 100? And then you're like, well, it turns out we just did it and that's on the record now, So were there some moments like that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And again, it was like, being in that extended flow state and just being in it is so helpful for that kind of thing, especially. But this is kind of taking it back for a second and like whatever. But I, and kind of going into a whole nother thing that we have talked about, but I wanted this EP to be a soundtrack for this whole like visual world I had in my head. Instead of having like a playlist of, and I did ultimately put together like a reference playlist and all of that, but before I did any of that, before I touched that, I put together a Pinterest board with like all these visual inspirations, and I was just like really leaning into visual art. And like it was at that time when I'm like getting outside a lot and like hiking and camping and just trying to like lean into like the natural beauty and all of that. And I was like, I want the music to feel like the soundtrack for this. I want the music to make me feel the way that this feels, the way that like, being out here feels. And so I wanted to take that with me. And so that was like a conscious choice of like wanting things to feel that way. So I knew that going in. And then, once we were in there, we just like had that time and space to play around with stuff. So like, for example, not all of the drums, but like most of the drums on the record, they were recorded in the garage there. We like had my drummer come up and set everything up, and then we ran them through a delay pedal, and then like, really like layered them out like crazy. And we were just like, oh, let's just like see how this sounds, and then we were like, this sounds sick. So there was a lot of that. And there are so many guitars on the record. Like there are so many moments that sound like a synth, but they are guitars. And like I'm a guitarist, and then Dan is just like an insane guitarist. And so, and he's all like, you can't let him he'll make the entire thing guitars if you let him.
I like him already.
Right. But so like there's like, I mean, there's easily like 20 guitar tracks on the song, and then, you know, you've got like the other 10 below type of thing. That's like the ratio that I would say. So yeah, there's like a lot of messing around with that and like that kind of thing. It's cool. I don't know.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite effect on the record? I'd say as a guitar player, I'm inclined to initially say what's your favorite pedal that you use on the record, but I'll broaden the scope for non-guitar players. What's your favorite effect that you stumbled across?
Yeah. Well, honestly, it might be the drum thing. Like in Sad Chick, we're gonna get real specific here.
That's what we love. That's what we're here for.
Yeah, it seems like this is the place for it. In the post-chorus of Sad Chick, it's like got this cool, like it's like this like tom fill pattern, and it's like doga 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 underneath, and it's not even like him really playing that. It's just like the delay pedal getting like panned and stuff. And I remember like when we like did it and it worked and it happened, we were just like, oh my god. And now it's like still like just one of my favorite moments.
And you couldn't picture the song without it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and a moment was born. I love that. That's why I asked, because I was like, now these are my favorite parts about these episodes. Is for anybody that hasn't listened and goes and listens to that, they're gonna like zero in and just be like, oh, that's so. Yeah, and it is, but it's even more amazing when you're in there in the moment and you've just created it and you're like. And you know that's where it has to be. I love that. What a beautiful way to create.
Case, you just brought up an interesting point, talking about like when you know. When do you know, Celeste? When was it like, oh yeah, yep, that's it, cool. Stop printing all delays from here on out.
Stop messing with it. Don't touch it.
Yeah. Was there like a point during the production process, and then like, I guess for the rest of your process, but like, let's do a two-parter.
Okay.
First part during like that like month-long retreat. And then second part is like, we'll get into that after.
So if I'm remembering your question correctly, it's just a gut thing. I don't know. It just felt so right. And we're like standing there just like both of us like look at each other and we're just like moving to it, and it feels right, you know? And I think like I will say this process, like before I loved my music and I was confident in it, whatever, but I was like definitely a little bit of like I don't know if this is good, like tell me. Whereas now, you know, in like a, you know, not in like a pretentious way or anything, but I'm like, this is fucking good. And I feel really good about it and it feels right. And that process like helped me just feel a lot more confident. And like, if it felt right, being like, yeah, that's it. Okay, next.
Cool. Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome. Well, I think another interesting aspect to this EP that we haven't touched on yet are like
oh yeah, we got to go there. We got to go there.
Yeah.
And so the follow-up question to the first one is like during, we'll call it like the creation process of like these videos and like the thesis of what Tauchar is it ever more than a gut feeling for you as far as like where it feels good, what feels right? Like, is there like the chills down the back of your spine? You're like, oh yeah, you know what? That's it. That's great.
There were definitely some moments that were like that. Like, for example, like recording like the choral moment in Little Bird. It was like we laid that down, and then I worked on that with my friend Phil, who was, speaking of Zoom sessions, he was in London at the time. So we were working with like an 8-hour time difference and like all the things. He laid down his parts and we played it back, and I was like, oh, that feels like really good. Chills down the spine. But for me, it's less about it being a specific thing and knowing when it's right. And I think it's more about, again, kind of just going back to what I was saying in terms of the confidence. I'm trying to trust myself a lot more when it doesn't feel right. And like when it comes to the videos, for example, like if there's a concept that I'm trying to make work and it just doesn't feel right, like not chasing it, or if there's a collaborator or like somebody who I'm working with where it's just not gelling, just trusting that and like not pursuing that further than I should.
Yeah. I think that is such an important, I'm glad you brought that point to light, Tom. And I'm glad you touched on that, Celeste, because that's, I think zeroing in on knowing what it feels like when something isn't correct is maybe the guiding force behind that. I mean, and it's almost like, when you get there because you stop thinking about, is this right? You stop asking yourself those questions. And I think what you're describing is you have that confidence. That confidence appears and awakens within you. I mean, in the same way where Tom and I have a lot of conversations like this, even when it comes to mixing, right? Because it's a very subtle art, and it's like the balancing, you can get into such micro movements and nuanced things, that at least this is also part of like, I guess, thank you pandemic, got into the standing desk world, finally long overdue. And now the majority of creative, like audio-based stuff, whether it's mixing or doing productions, I do from a standing position, because the second that I find myself just not staring tunnel vision at the screen or whatever, and I'm just dancing and I'm like moving, and you mentioned, you and Dan there, like when that drum moment happened, you were just moving in it. And it's like, that becomes my like physical guiding force. And I hear that and see that from so many other people, where it's not even a verbal thing. It's not even like a check. If you're a band, you're writing one-on-one. This was, when everybody's in a room, you kind of just finish out and you just know the moment's working. I think, just trusting your instincts, and almost like physically so, right? In a lot of those moments. Absolutely. Let's then walk into, at what point do you start to see each song in a visual realm? So interestingly enough, you talked about the kind of inspo board that you put together, that you pulled from while you were constructing the record itself. Do you go back to that after the song's finished, or do you start to see if songs take on a different visualization as you create them? How has that worked for you? Yeah, a little of both, honestly. I think that there are some songs where I've seen the video like while we were working on the EP, like before they're even recorded. I'm like, I know what this concept is. This is what this is in my head. And then there are some where I do kind of like pull back and look at that visual inspiration board. I think that this whole process for the record and the videos, it just was like a serendipitous thing where I was like, this is the world it's in, and this is it. And so it really was very clear to me. And for example, the Don't Want You to Love Me video, I knew that there was a mannequin in that video before we even finished recording the song. And then I brought it to my friend Chanel, who I collaborated with on several of the videos, and they were like, I'm seeing a mannequin situation, you're in a relationship with a mannequin. And I was like, what the fuck? That's what I have been seeing for a year. Very strange coincidence, but I think that because the songs were so because the whole record was so inspired by that visual, it has been a little bit easier for me to come up with what I want that real visual to look like. When it comes to the actual concepts, there's more pulling of weeds that has to be done, of course, but at least aesthetically, I've been able to kind of have somewhat of a path to follow. Yeah.
Can you walk us through the video process? Because I think it's intertwined with the EP, at least for me. And I think Case may feel that way, but walk us through the process, who's involved and what does that look like?
Absolutely. Well, so hilariously, I live in LA, so there are a lot of people who work in film around me, people that I'm friends with. I have a DP who lives in a converted ambulance in my driveway.
That's a story for another podcast, but I feel you could fill another whole episode with that, whatever's behind that alone. But so we'll leave that there.
Exactly.
But okay.
My window looks out at it. I'm looking at it as we speak. And then my roommate's boyfriend, who's also a very close friend of mine, he's a producer, mostly working in film. And so during the pandemic, obviously I wasn't gonna hire a big crew or anything. Also, it's expensive. So I just like said to Sean, my producer friend, I was like, we should make a video. And, you know, he pulled in Colin, the DP, and my friend Chanel, and it was just the four of us on that video. And we just like stole a bunch of footage around LA, and it was cool, you know, just making that with such a small team of my friends, because we were able to really just like have fun getting creative and weird with it. And, you know, 3 out of the 4 of us were just at my house all the time. So like anytime we were hanging out, we were like, so what about like XYZ? And my poor roommate, she's like trying to hang out with her boyfriend. He's like, Celeste, this is the thing I came up with, you know?
Can't talk business at the dinner table. You can't talk art at the dinner table.
Right, exactly. But so that was a really fun process. And, you know, all of the videos have looked a little bit different from that regard. Like, Don't Want You to Love Me was definitely a larger production from that standpoint, because just being indoors, like, it just required so much more crew from the perspective of like lighting and there being a little bit more of a narrative element. And then like the Summerlin video, that is actually kind of an interesting story. You know, like the story of the song is that 5 days after a breakup, I ended up in my ex's hometown of Summerlin, which is outside of Vegas. And like that actually did happen, obviously. And outside of Summerlin, there's this really beautiful national conservation area, Red Rock National Conservation Area, which if anybody's in Vegas, like it's a great, you know, it's pretty short and quick. Like you can totally do it in the morning, and it's just really beautiful. And at the time when I was like there having that experience that would lead to the song, you know, we went out there and it was so beautiful. And I was like, as I was coming up with the song in my head, I was also like, oh, and I'm like really sad about my breakup. But then at the same time, I'm like, oh, like this video, it's going to like look really cool. I have to come back to film it here. And that again was like the same team as Sad Chick, basically, because we just like went out there and like ran around the park and got footage, and didn't manage to not get in trouble. I tried to get a permit because it's like a national park basically, and nobody picked up. So I was like, you know what? We're just going to do it.
Yeah. If you're listening to this, not her fault. That's on
not
you.
Not my fault.
The window wasn't open to pay your like $20 park entry fee. So
right.
Yeah, that's, yeah, there was no box to leave your like donation in. I love that. So that's such a like, so a lot of these were done in, you know, kind of like not like a guerrilla style way, but just like, you know, just kind of, you and your friends, and they look magnificent. And I think, you know, that probably speaks volumes to them understanding what you're trying to go for, right? And working in that industry and working visually there too. I think that's interesting. So if we're pulling out a lesson from this, if you want to have a really incredible video for every song on your EP, I guess you have to move to LA and find a house with a bunch of roommates and some weird ambulance in the driveway that's full of a DP that's got some availability. And it just all happened. Okay, cool. Not easy enough. Taking notes.
Check.
But I mean, in a way, that's also kind of serendipitously leaning into the strengths of your situation and your network, right?
Oh, 100%.
And here it was all of that was set up to put forward some incredible visual vignettes that brought all these songs to another place, which is awesome, right? Like some people might have strengths in, hey, I have the best live band. I could have any musician from a live band standpoint that can do somersaults over anybody else's band, right? You know, and I always talk about playing to strengths. And I think, yeah, like the fact that you see things, and this record starts from such a visual place with the inspiration and then those ideas that you laid out on that board. It only feels fitting to kind of end, you know, in that same immersive place by you putting those things forward visually. So I love that so much. Celeste, this has been such a wonderful walkthrough on this. And I have one last thing written down that I was like, only if it feels interesting. We don't normally do something like this. But Tom, should we go for the lightning round? Should we do our first ever record process lightning round?
You start on odds. I'll take evens.
Okay, great. Okay, so I'll start it off. That sounds great. Okay. Number 1, lyrics or melody first?
No. Okay. Lyrics.
Okay. I like that. Tom, number 2.
Character or plot?
Plot first. Okay. Oh, I like that. Okay. Very good. Number 3, setting or wardrobe, which speaks louder in visual content?
Wardrobe.
Oh, I like that. Honestly, there's some great wardrobes in this video too. It's loud as hell.
Not to expand upon this lightning round answer too much.
That's okay. We'll pause the lightning round, pausing the timer.
Yeah. If you don't have like a big budget and you don't have like some crazy set, like having a specific outfit that like shows who this person is, what the visual is, like suddenly, boom, there's intention behind it. There's an eye-catching thing, and you can be walking through the park, but you have this crazy outfit on.
Damn. If that wasn't a nice mic, I tell you to pick it up and drop it right now. But so, okay, unpausing. That's incredible. That's what, okay. Honestly, this lightning round is going incredibly well, Tom. Number 4, that's you.
Camera or microphone?
Microphone.
Oh, okay. And a singer at heart. We like that. Okay.
Yeah. It's got to sound good.
Okay. I love that. Number 5, you have to choose one here. And this is like you get one forever type thing, right? So you have to steer into either lane.
Oh, God.
A silent color film or black and white film with sound.
A black and white film with sound.
Okay. We're noticing a pattern here. Okay. Got to have the audio. The audio, very important component. This is checking out as a musician. I like that. Tom, he hasn't even written it in our chat right now. Tom, what's number 6?
Desert or forest?
Oh,
forest.
Oh, all right, cool.
Honestly,
I don't even have to think.
Very strong. There's a bit of both out there in California.
There's both. And I gotta say, no disrespect to the desert. I used to not like the desert. I kind of love it now. Like I have a new respect for it. It's so beautiful and weird. But at the end of the day, it's forest.
That's incredible. The desert yields so many. I'm a big cactus guy. We've got a bunch of them around the house. And every time I look at them, I'm just like, how do you exist? And just against all odds. So it is magnificent. But the forest is also just like this never-ending treasure trove of just there's so much stuff in there. It's kind of like the ocean where you're terrified at how much stuff is in there in one little like piece. Celeste, this has been amazing. Thank you for taking the maiden voyage on our record process lightning round.
Yeah.
That was pretty fun, Tom.
Yeah.
I like that. Some really good and very illuminating answers. But once again, moving forward, where can everybody find you? Give yourself that shout out that this EP and your artistry deserves. We will obviously link to it in the show notes. But yeah, like let everybody know where they can check all of that out real quick.
Yeah. So my music is on all streaming platforms under the name Tauchar, and then I'm on all the social media things at Tauchar Celeste. That's the name for all of it, Tauchar Celeste.
Love it.
Oh, wonderful. And do you have anything, I'll say non-musical, for everybody to look out for on the horizon? Because I think I heard a thing or two about something, but I'm not sure if it can be confirmed or spoken of yet.
Oh, it can be. Okay. Yes, you're right. I forgot about that. So I'm in a Netflix movie called Purple Hearts. Let me tell you. It is kooky fun. I was supposed to be in that as like a background, like skilled background, just playing keys. And then just a quick like 30-second story.
Yeah.
They were like, I was just supposed to be skilled background, and the main character, she has a band, and they didn't have us speaking at all. So it was like really uncomfortable because if we were on screen, we'd just kind of like wave goodbye or whatever. And it was like, well, if they're in a band, like they probably like hang out and talk. So then they were like, okay, we got to like wire them and like have them actually speak and interact. So I don't know if it made it in the movie, but there might be a couple lines in there. But yeah, July 29th, Purple Hearts. I am very intrigued to see what it ended up becoming.
Oh, wow. That's incredible. You LA types. Oh, and I forgot I'm in a movie on Netflix.
Well, it's like not the main thing. I don't know. It was like 10 days of my life.
Hey, it sounds like it was a pretty cool 10 days, and we look forward to seeing what that 10 days yielded. But yeah, Celeste, thank you again. Good luck with the EP. Good luck on tour. And we have got to cross paths. I hope to see you play all these songs live, and you've got to let us know if you're in Philly or Atlanta so we can see if those dates line up, because that would be awesome to see it all live. live. So
definitely.
Yes, thank you again.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
So cutting through the awkwardness of virtual collaboration is not always an easy task. I think a lot of artists and producers found this out firsthand during the pandemic. I know I did. And I think what made Celeste's approach to it so successful here is that she refused to hold back when she was communicating remotely via Zoom. And she almost ended up harnessing an original songwriting workflow that was framed around stepping back from that virtual conversation to explore individual creative sprints before returning to the session and kind of digging into them further. Clearly very effective for anybody that has heard the songs that she's speaking about. And I think a really cool takeaway for anybody that's doing this same kind of thing or trying to work with band members or other co-writers remotely nowadays and even beyond the pandemic. I think another important aspect of what made the songs on this EP so successful was the fact that Celeste and Dan were able to build out the time and the space for experimenting with an array of guitar-based effects. They were able to shape a distinct and authentic tonal character and input that kind of spatial depth that was ultimately so crucial to the cinematic emotion Celeste was trying to evoke with these stories. And I really think it's that kind of sonic experimentation that helped marry these songs with the accompanying visual elements so well. So I really hope that this conversation inspired you as much as it did us, and that you're able to take some of those things and run with them in the future. As always, thank you so much for being a part of our process, and we will catch you next time on
The Record Process.